All right, one of the most commonly overlooked things I think in e-commerce is choosing a bad manufacturer or not spending enough time choosing the right manufacturer for your Shopify brand or whatever it is. So let's go ahead and get into this. This video is on how to source suppliers for your Shopify brand, your online business in 2025. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so first off, why is it so important that you choose the right manufacturer? Many businesses, they don't give this as much attention as they should. And really, this is one of the areas that I think can make a massive impact on the success of a brand. Because you got to think, if you have a brand that is, a great product that you sell, let's say you have a great product that you sell, but you aren't able to stay in stock because you're having issues with your manufacturer, then what's going to happen? If you're constantly out of stock, your margins are probably going to tank, and that could severely affect the success of the brand and your ability to actually scale the brand and grow the business, all because of the manufacturer. Or if you're having a major quality issue and they aren't working to fix it, that could also have a major impact on the success of your brand and completely destroy the brand altogether. So this is one of the things that people, really don't spend a lot of time on, it seems. And, I'm not really sure why that is, because this affects your prices, it affects your product quality, it affects your stock, and your ability to offer new products in the future. So all these things inside your business that this has a huge effect on, it really stems back to, who you choose as a supplier and how you go about choosing the supplier that you work with. So this is a business that I work with and that I've helped to solve, one of the problems that they were having. So here was, just basically a summary of this specific business. This guy had a product invention. And when he got his product first made and he invented the product, he had it designed and everything, he did so with a supplier that he had found through Alibaba. And they were overseas in China. He was having some issues with the quality with the lids for this specific product. Everything else pretty much was fine, except the lids would constantly be not snapping correctly. And this was likely due to a design issue, one, with the product, but also with a mold issue with how the molds were actually made. So the supplier did not want to take any accountability for this. They said basically all the lids were made the same, didn't want to take any accountability. So, he decided for a number of reasons, that being one of them, that he wanted to transition to a supplier in the US. Now, what happened was when he transitioned to a supplier in the US, oddly enough, this person knew the previous supplier that was overseas. So I thought that was a little weird, to say the least. But he transitions to the supplier who's in the United States. And this was not somebody who, in my opinion, was a really reputable manufacturer. They had the machinery, but they weren't a very well-established, very reputable manufacturer. And he ran into a whole host of issues when he did this. One of the reasons being that the molds themselves, when they were built, they were not properly built, which is a common thing when you are dealing with tooling that is made overseas. So when they actually do the tooling for injection molding, when they make it overseas, a lot of times what you'll see happen is they make it very cheaply. And there's a number of reasons for this, but they'll make it very cheaply when they actually make this tooling overseas versus if, say, you were to get it made in the United States. So they'll make it very cheaply. They won't really do it properly because they can run the stuff at a very long cycle time, which is a whole nother conversation. So they'll do this, they'll make the tooling very cheaply. And if you were to take that same tooling and you were to bring it into the United States, sometimes it may work fine, but a lot of times what can happen is you can run into a whole host of new quality issues. And that's what happened in this case. So he was seeing a defect rate or a reject rate of around 20% from the company that we work with that was doing a visual inspection essentially. around a 20% reject rate just from the visual inspection of his cup parts for this specific cup alone. And that is not very good, if you ask me. So they were also mentioning other things. We had this, the units that he was sending us basically inspected by different people. One of them was another manufacturer, and they sent us a list of things that they noticed. One of the things that they noticed was they were pulling the parts out faster than they were supposed to try to make more profit. And this was actually causing the parts to come out incorrectly. So they were cutting corners not only with material quality, they were pulling parts out faster, running them at a faster cycle time than what they should have been running them at, just so they could make more profit at the expense of our business. So that's not how you do things if you're dealing with a good manufacturer. You don't want somebody who's going to cut corners with material quality or who's going to pull your parts out faster at the expense of your business. So those were some things that they were doing. We were constantly dealing with delays in production. When we would put an order in, we'd have to wait for weeks on a machine sometimes. We'd have issues come up where we'd be, basically running out of inventory due to some of these issues. Everything was disorganized. If you visit their facility, and this is not knocking them because I'm sure, this guy means well, who owns this company, but you'd visit the facility and you could just tell they weren't very organized. The place was, kind of a mess in a way. And it was very clear to see, what the issue was with why we were getting so many bad parts, why we were having so many issues. They also didn't really have any color options either, as far as I know. So we ran into a whole host of issues because of this. And, really to fix this, we had to make a big change. So what I started doing is, when I started talking with the owner of this business about why this is so important, to have a good manufacturer and how it's really hurting his business, because even though he liked the guy, and he seemed like a nice guy, we were running into these issues which were really affecting his business and really hurting the business. So, after talking with him, we decided to eventually make this change, right? And I began researching to find a reputable manufacturer, one that is actually really good at what they do. And I didn't just pick the first one that I came across like some people do. So along with finding this much better manufacturer for these cup parts that we were having made, that we're having issues with, we also had the ability to offer a new color option. So let's see here, let me move this. So we were getting the product, for this new color option for a similar price per unit. It was relatively similar to the others in terms of the pricing, slightly more expensive, but not a major difference. And we did run like a buy two, get one offer for this, since we were charging more for this specific color option, with it being a limited edition color option and everything, and us buying it in smaller quantities. So we did raise the price on this by, I believe, around $5. So this product, even with the price raise and everything, we sold out of the few hundred units that we had left over from our initial order for this color option pretty quickly. We'd ordered about 500 units of this color, and we sent 200 to a distributor, in a different country, as they were placing a fairly good size wholesale order. And the other, roughly 300 units we sold on our site. And we sold these very quickly for this product, after we started to advertise it a little bit. So this product had a roughly $20 higher lifetime value versus the standard black option for this specific product. And we sold them very quickly. So think about that for a second. Yes, we were running an offer for this specific product to try to get people to buy more, but people were spending, when they were buying this product, about $20 more. And mind you, at the time that, we're basing these numbers off of, it hadn't even been the full 180 days or whatever for the software that we use to calculate the lifetime value of a customer. So already about $20 more per customer that people were spending from buying this product. And they loved this color option. The feedback we were getting was great on it. And we did a survey, and they said this was basically the second favorite of the color options that we've had. Or of all the possible color options that we had listed, this was actually the second favorite, if that makes sense. So we had in December, just from these changes alone, essentially, and some other stuff we were working on with improving the packaging and everything, we saw a roughly 3x improvement, in sales from the previous year's sales in December. So the year before in December, much of the time we were out of stock. We ran into some major stock issues because of the manufacturing stuff and everything. And this year, we did about 3 times what we had done the previous year in December because we weren't having any major stock issues. We had that figured out. We had a new product. We increased the price because we know the quality is better. So we were making more per unit that we sell, and we did about 3 times the sales that we had done the previous year in December. So a major, major difference there just from basically, making some changes in manufacturing and product presentation, and then also a change in price. So what was it that I was actually looking for when I chose this supplier? So there's a lot of different things I'd be looking at and taking note of, right? So, you have to decide what it is that you want with this specific supplier. So one of the things I'm looking at is any reviews, customer feedback. Sometimes manufacturers, they may not have as many reviews from people who they're working with because they may be working with bigger customers. So they may not have as many Google reviews, for example. But you can be looking at who have they worked with? Are they working with other brands that are in my specific niche or other similar products to what I sell? Do they have a pretty good understanding of my specific type of product that I'm selling? So if you're working with somebody who specializes in automotive parts only, right? And they've never, ever done a part like you are wanting to offer, and they're not a very reputable company, they may not necessarily be the best fit for your specific brand. Also, communication is a very important one to me. If I'm emailing somebody, for example, and it takes them 2, 3, 4 weeks to get back to me every time I send them an email, and they just are giving me very short responses, not very detailed answers to any of my questions, they may not be a good fit, or if I just notice they aren't very professional. Like, for example, if the people who I'm emailing don't even have an email that is with their site, so they're emailing me back from, maybe an Outlook email or something, versus a specific email for their company. That's a good sign that maybe they're a smaller company, and that's something to at least take note of. So these are all little details that I'd be looking at whenever I'm choosing a manufacturer, right? So also organization and structure, and that kind of plays into the last thing as well, with their communication, with how they conduct business. Are they conducting business like they are an actual business, or are they conducting business like they aren't very serious? Are they having you show up and, for a meeting and everybody's in shorts, nobody's really taking it seriously. They're just kind of joking around, they're not really focused on actually listening to what you have to say. They don't seem to really know what they're talking about. Their warehouse, for example, is just a cluster, like super disorganized. You go to their bathroom, the bathroom's a mess. Everything is just a mess at the place. The employees, they look like they're just crawling out of bed, complaining about their job while you're there for a business meeting. And so they're complaining to you. This was something we actually saw with a company where we went to the warehouse, and one of the employees looks like they've just crawled out of bed, like they're half asleep, not even awake. And they're sitting there complaining to us while we're there on business about their job, and it's like, nobody wants to hear that. If you're at a business or at a manufacturing facility, and you're talking with this manufacturer about something, you don't want to hear employees complaining about their job and how much they hate being there, right? So that kind of plays into the work environment one. But, the pricing is going to be another big one as well. I would also ask about any other additional fees. Are there going to be additional fees involved with modifying our tooling? If you have tooling that was maybe overseas and then you're transitioning to the United States, there could be additional fees involved to modify that tooling to be able to work well in the United States. And, those things may be required to get good parts if your tooling was not properly built to begin with. For instance, so that would apply more to like injection molding and, other similar processes. Your ability to offer other color options or other secondary services that could be useful to you is also very important as well. So, like I said, that one color option ended up selling really well for us, higher lifetime value, higher average order value. So your ability to offer other colors, other, designs of the product, new versions of the product in the future, any other secondary services, customization, new packaging, whatever it is, all that stuff is very important when choosing a manufacturer. So you want to take that stuff into account as well. And look into those factors also. And then also the work environment, like I was saying, do the employees at least look like they somewhat want to be there? Do all the employees look miserable, like they hate their job? Are they arguing with each other and stuff? Does it look like a very toxic work environment? And then also take into account whoever it is that you're communicating with the company, what is their position inside the company and how long have they been there? So if they have only been there, 6 months, for instance, and they're the head tooling manager, that's going to look a lot different to me versus somebody who's been there 20 years, 30 years at that same company. If they've been there 20 or 30 years, that tells me, one, they probably have a good bit of experience, but also it's probably a pretty good work environment as well, or more likely to be a good work environment. So outside of the United States, what are some ways that you could go about sourcing a product? Now, if they don't speak the same language as you, sourcing a product from somebody outside the United States can be a little bit more challenging if you're not using like a third-party app. So you can use something like Alibaba. Now, sometimes on Alibaba, what you'll run into is the person who you're dealing with may be like a trading company, for example, or they may actually not be the real manufacturer of that product, or they may be manufacturing some components of the product, but not all the components. So that is something to be wary of. Also, you may have more fees and stuff involved with dealing with them directly on Alibaba. So if you want the best prices and, the best payment term, you want the best prices really, which is a pretty important thing, and you want to go direct to the manufacturer and not deal with a middleman, one way to do that is you can hire a sourcing agent in the country that you were sourcing from, in the area that you were sourcing from, and they need to speak your language and then also the language of the country that you were sourcing from or area that you're sourcing from. So they need to speak the local language as well that the manufacturers use. And they need to be fluent in both of those, and also ideally be able to visit that place in person to communicate with them. And then you want them to obviously have a good track record of success as well in doing that and experience doing that. So how do you avoid quality issues and get the best price? So, this is another one that, a lot of people don't really put a lot of time into. If you were injection molding, for instance, which is very popular with plastic products, for example, you want to ensure the molds are being properly built and the product is professionally designed. So you got to keep in mind this may cost more upfront. So if you're on a tight budget to work with to start, maybe you have to kind of start with a cheaper mold design, but just plan to later on have that redesigned if you see that the product is starting to see some success to where you can to have that mold properly designed to try to reduce your costs if possible and fix any defective issues. So it may cost more depending on what the product is to have it properly professionally designed and professionally done, but that is definitely something worth investing in if you have the money and you're confident in your product, in my opinion. So I would also, and I have this in all caps for a reason, avoid any unnecessary parts. Do not try to overcomplicate stuff whenever you are getting a product manufactured. More complexity will lead to more issues, generally speaking. So you want everything that you do when you're dealing with product manufacturing, getting a product designed, inventing a new product, whatever it is, you want it to be as simple as possible. So you want it to do whatever it is that you're wanting it to do in the simplest way possible. So don't go adding a bunch of extra parts that are going to drive your product cost up and make your product more difficult to use. Make it as simple to use as possible. Make it do the job that you want it to do as good as you possibly can as soon as possible, and avoid adding a bunch of unnecessary parts. And by the way, If a supplier keeps trying to get you to add extra parts that serve no real purpose, saying, hey, why don't we use this rubber O-ring for the lids, versus instead of doing just a twist off lid, which would make more sense. Why don't we use a rubber O-ring for the lids? That would make it more difficult to use and add an extra part. If they're suggesting things like that, for example, or they're saying, hey, why don't we add this piece to the lid as well? That's a specialty piece that you can't get anywhere else. What they're doing is they are making your product more complicated so that they can essentially, in my opinion at least, it could vary, there could be some other reason that they're suggesting these things, but what may very well be happening is they're trying to get you to add extra parts so that they can make more profit off of you and make your product more complicated, which would result in more issues with your customers likely, and make it more difficult to use the product. So avoid suppliers that are suggesting all these unnecessary parts and keep trying to push you to add a bunch of extra parts. They may be doing this so that they can make more money off of you. So don't be fooled by that. And if necessary, if you're in a situation where you're getting a product from, overseas or whatever it may be, and let's say you're running into an issue where a lot of your lids are not working properly, you could hire a third-party full pre-shipment inspection to go to that manufacturing place and do an inspection before those units are shipped. So that's another possibility as well. So, just to kind of sum this up, what are the general best practices with finding a manufacturer, changing your manufacturer, whatever it may be? Number one, pay more to have stuff done properly the first time or as soon as you can possibly afford to. So do not wait around. If you can afford to invest in fixing an issue that you're having and you have a product that's selling well, do not sit around and wait to fix that issue over a one-time expense that would completely solve the problem. In my opinion, at least, that wouldn't be very smart. So if you have the money coming in and your product is seeing some success and you have a cheaply built mold and you're having an issue with your lid, fix the issue. Or if you're having an issue with the manufacturer, don't sit around and wait just because you like this manufacturer. If they keep having the same issues, start to look for a new manufacturer. If they keep having issues, they're exhibiting red flags, they don't seem to want to solve the problems or take any accountability, start looking for a manufacturer that will and figure out a game plan on how to solve whatever problem that is. So number two, spend more time up front making sure you pick the right supplier to begin with. Don't just pick somebody because they're the cheapest. Don't pick them just because you like them. Look at the other factors involved and make sure you're making a good decision for the health of your business. Number three, make sure you pick, when you're designing your product, make sure that you are designing it in such a way where it is very simply designed. Even if you have a fairly complex product, make it as simple as you possibly can to use. Make it as easy to use as possible. Make it so that there are as few moving parts as possible that function as well as you possibly can. So don't add a bunch of extra parts that don't even add any real purpose just because a supplier suggests them. If you haven't actually tested them or there's no actual logical reason that they would help to improve the quality of the product. So figure out how to make it as simple as possible. Pay somebody, if you have the money, to have it professionally designed to begin with. Don't just work with your manufacturers, engineers or designers or whatever, to have the product design built if they haven't exhibited that they can do a really good job at it. So it would be better to get the design designed professionally from somebody who isn't the manufacturer if you're really trying to do it properly. And it may cost more to do that, but it's probably going to result in a better product if you choose the right person. And then lastly, get samples, first. If you were having a mold built for a product, at least in the United States and really in other places, they should be doing this too. They should be sending you samples before they finalize that mold design. So if you're having a product built, for instance, and then they don't suggest sending you samples first, if they're building a mold for your product, that's not exactly the best business practices, for instance. So you're going to want to get samples first from wherever it is before you make a decision. Ideally, you're going to want to do at least one sample run where you see a few units at the very least, and ideally, depending on the product, you want to get samples from multiple different suppliers and get quotes from multiple different suppliers, depending on what the product is, before you even, come to a decision, right? So those are just some things I'd be looking at if I were sourcing a manufacturer for somebody. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to leave it in the comments below. But I hope you guys found this helpful. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe for more. And let me know what you want to see next.